Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Comics the Gathering. It's your host Jesse, as always. We've got another EDH deck tech for you today. Today we're doing the Anje Falkenrath Madness Precon. And the way I've transformed this deck is very interesting. This deck does have CEDH capabilities. You can make this a very hyper-competitive deck if you want. Again, none of my deck techs go into the CEDH territory. And quite frankly, most of the upgrades I made to this deck, with the exception of maybe one or two, are actually fairly budget. So I'm going to go over the deck tech now. And but first of all, let's talk about kind of like how I transformed this deck. This is a bizarre, almost tempo strategy in the Rakdos colors, which is weird for this color scheme. Rakdos is traditionally a, balls to the wall, aggressive aggro set of colors. When Rakdos as a guild first appeared, they had the Hellbent mechanic where you're trying to play out all the cards in your hand and get empty-handed as fast as possible. So, this is a departure from that. Primarily because of what Anje does, or Anje, depending on what the pronunciation is. So what ends up happening is we end up with a kind of like mid-rangey reanimator style that can do some crazy explosive plays and always has a very consistent value engine. So let's get into the creatures here. The first creature that I chose to add in on the upgrade, and is actually fairly decent budget option, is Ox of Agonas from Theros Beyond Death. It is a nice recursive threat that recurs from the graveyard cheaper than its initial casting cost, and it can also, when it enters, you discard your hand and you draw 3 cards. In a deck that is discard focused like this, you do have a lot of recursion, and you keep that. For every card you're discarding, you're usually also drawing a card, so your hand size will stay the same, but once you start getting a lot of your lands into play and stuff, your hand size does shrink over time. So if there's a point where you get down to 1 or maybe 2 cards, or completely hell-bent, having this as a way to recur it from the graveyard for 2 mana, be a threat, and refill your hand up to 3 cards is rather nice. The next card is a super budget option that is also very essential to the deck. This is one of the best upgrades you can make to the deck, and I think it costs like 70 cents. And that is Archfiend of Ifnir. Archfiend of Ifnir is a fantastic inclusion here. Anytime you cycle or discard a card, all of your opponent's creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. So if you can do some shenanigans with discarding and other things, you can very easily wrath your opponent's entire board. Plus, it's I believe it's either a 4/4 or 5/5 with flying. I can't remember off the top of my head, and I don't have the deck in front of me. I just have my show notes. So definitely, fantastic card. In addition to being a threat, it's just a continuous, repetitive wrath. Next, we have Nabob Dreadhorde Champion from War of the Spark. Fantastic card. Sir Conrad the Grim. Now you're going to be discarding a lot of creature cards. He's going to be putting in the damage, doing a lot of work, and he's going to be draining your opponent's life totals down because it hits all of your opponents at once. In that same vein, we have Psychosis Crawler. As we're drawing these cards, because we're constantly looting, or rummaging, we want to be, turning that card draw into more things. So every time you're drawing a card, Psychosis Crawler, boom, it's dealing another point of damage to your opponent. Cavalier of Flame, new inclusion to the deck, fantastic. He has the whole choose any number of cards in your hand, discard them, draw that many cards clause when he enters the battlefield. He's a big threat on his own. He has pseudo fire breathing. I believe it's 1 and a red, and he'll pump himself when he so fantastic there. Plus he has his death trigger as well. Champion of Stray Souls. This one actually comes included with the deck. Fantastic card. Being able to recur a bunch of things out of your graveyard at once is really nice, especially with this next card, Flayer of the Hatebound. Flayer of the Hatebound is one of your primary win cons. This deck doesn't try to win with outright beats. A lot of the creatures are small. Even the best creatures you're recurring are not that strong. So being able to chip in burn damage on your opponents consistently is very important. Champion of the Stray Souls combined with Flayer of the Hatebound can enable that in a mass amount, and usually enough to burn out your opponent very, very quickly. I did keep in Anje's Ravager and Overseer of the Damned. Anje's Ravager, again, being another way to restock your hand. The only downside to it is in the early game, if your hand is still pretty full, he can, end up nerfing your whole hand. So he's a card you definitely want to see mid to late game, or you want to hold on to him if you do get him early. And then, of course, Overseer of the Damned helps out with every time your opponent's stuff dies, you're getting zombies. That with Archfiend of Ifnir can get really crazy. Viscera Seer, we wanted some sack outlets. There is a lot of recursion that we can do out of the graveyard to regain those enter the battlefield triggers, and also get like Flayer of the Hatebound triggers. So having a very cheap sack outlet for the deck was really nice. Grave Scrabbler included in the deck. He's a cheaper Grave Digger. He's basically the same card, but he has Madness on him as well, that you can Madness him in for 2. So 2 mana for a 2/2 that also recurs you a card from your graveyard. Seems really good. Plague Crafter, of course, is just going to be a staple forever now. As previously Fleshbag Marauder, but Plague Crafter came on in and said, no, I hit Planeswalkers too. So fantastic card there. Solemn Simulacrum. One of the cards you don't mind hitting with Plague Crafter or Viscera Seer comes into play, gets you a land, dies, draws you a card. Archfiend of Spite, one of the new inclusions in the deck. Really like Archfiend of Spite a lot. Having a big threat that you can Madness in for a fair price of 5 instead of the 7 casting cost that's on his normal text box is really good. And then whenever he's dealt damage, you make the opponent sacrifice that many permanents. So he's a great surprise blocker. Being able to kill one of your opponent's creatures and then make them also sacrifice that many cards as well. Or if they come at you with a big Eldrazi and they're like, oh, Annihilator 4, and you're like, okay, let's put this in front of it, and then they have to sack their whole board because they did 10, 11, 12 damage to him. It's kind of hilarious. Next we have probably one of the best cards included in the deck that is new, and that's Kirk, Son of Yawgmoth. Making a card that says all black mana symbols can be treated as Phyrexian mana is kind of bonkers. It's a really, really, really powerful effect. And I don't think that there's ever going to be a deck that is mono black or black and 1 color again that doesn't want to consider playing Kirk. So next we have another one that's included in the deck, also focusing in on the Reanimator strategy and giving you a nice big evasive threat with Intimidate, and that's Geth, Lord of the Vault. After Geth, we have Magus of the Wheel. Having wheel effects is always going to be good in a deck that wants to discard and draw more cards. Having it on a 2/3 blockable body is also nice. Or maybe he might be a 2/2. He might be a 2/2. I might be fucking that up. Don't quote me on that. So let's talk about the most important card in the entire deck. If you have Anje, then you need to get Squee, Goblin Nabob, as soon as possible. The value engine you recur off of always having Squee is phenomenal. You just end step of the turn right before yours, tap Anje, discard Squee, draw a card, and then on your upkeep you get Squee back. Like, that's fantastic. And then also if you have Madness and stuff as well, you can do those first, and then always end with discarding Squee. You end up grinding out so much card advantage on that. Very, very essential. Next we have, in all the commander decks this cycle, they included a Soul in each of the deck. This one has Soul of Innistrad. I do like this card a lot in the deck because it has both practical applications on the battlefield and in the graveyard. So no matter how you end up playing with it, it ends up, you know, in a good capacity either way. Another inclusion in the deck is a Doomed Necromancer. Like I said, we do have some light Reanimator synergies. Being able to sacrifice this guy for 1 mana and tapping him to get back any creature from your graveyard is really, really powerful. And you can do that at instant speed. After that, we have one of my favorite add-ins for the deck, Balthor the Defiled. Let me get this particular card real quick. So he has the text, all minions get +1/+1. There are a couple minions in the deck. I believe Kirk is actually a minion. And there are several others. Let me find Kirk real quick. Yes, he's a horror minion. And then if you keep him in, Chainer, Nightmare Adept is also a minion. So that text is relevant, but not amazing. But he has pay triple black and remove him from the game. Each player returns all black and all red creature cards from his or her graveyard to play. You can see why in a deck that is only black and red, that is crazy powerful. He is a late game finisher. You load up your graveyard all game. You stick him, you pay triple black, you remove him from the game, and you recur your entire graveyard. And you can do that at instant speed. You can do that, you know, whenever you need to stick a whole blocking force up, or, you know, whatever it may be. So it's a very, very powerful effect. And you can also get him very cheap. After Balthor, we have a Big Game Hunter. You know, a nice little madness card that can surprise and kill out bigger creatures. I did put an Anger in here. I do think this deck requires you to play Anger. You have a discard synergy. You have basic mountains. Why not give all your creatures haste? And then probably one of the better standalone creatures that's going to see pretty decent techs around, and that's Bone Miser. Bone Miser is the reverse of Waste Not. Waste Not was when you made your opponents discard. This one's for when you discard. And he does all sorts of crazy things in addition to being a 4/4. He's going to make mana, draw you cards, blah, blah, blah. Fantastic, fantastic card. Really, really good. Planeswalker Rise. The deck does come with an Ob Nixilis Reignited. I did leave him in. I saw no reason to take him out. There were better cuts to make for the things that I added in. Going on to the instance, we do have a couple of things here. I put in Songs of the Damned. I do believe that is a great little ramp spell when you need to be explosive for a turn after stocking your graveyard with creatures. Entomb is a little bit of a pricier add-on here, but being able to put the exact creature in your graveyard that you want for recursion, or being able to get Squee into the graveyard, is fantastic. And you want to get Squee as often as possible. He sets up so much. Removal-wise, I also have a Terminate and a Chaos Warp. One of my favorite add-ons I saw when I was researching this deck was Wretched Confluence. I think that card does a lot for the deck. I'm going to pull that real quick. So it's 5 mana instant, 3 black. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, or return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. There's just a lot of utility there in what you can do, and I think it's very valuable and essential for the deck. Then the final instant is Cauldron Dance. You can only cast it during combat. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Its controller sacrifices it at the beginning of the next end step. So it's a fantastic way to just throw in, reanimate 1 big threat, cheat another one in that you can reanimate later, to get in for some big damage. Or if you have Flayer the Hatebound, or one of the enchantments we'll talk about here in a little bit, Warstorm Surge, on the field you can get some damage, hit certain enemies, and then get in for a big attack too. Moving on to sorceries, we have Restless Dreams. Fantastic card in this deck. You can see how it clearly fits in. We have Dread Return. You're making a lot of token creatures, and you have a lot of cheap creatures that you're madnessing into play. So being able to sack those creatures to recur a bigger threat out of the graveyard is always nice. Buried Alive puts 3 creatures from your deck to your graveyard. So again, doing the same thing Entomb does, but more. Nightmare Unmaking is a fun little card. I do believe that was included with the deck. Let me double check that Nightmare Unmaking real quick. Yes. So this is basically like a weird flexible wrath that you can kind of sculpt. I do like this card because it exiles. I think that's the main reason it made the cut for me, as opposed to just teching in a Damnation or something. Is this gets around indestructible, and you can kind of sculpt this to keep your board intact and to remove more of your opponent's board. I do like its flexibility. After that, we have Ingaruk's Wake included in the deck, and obviously this card just levels your opponents. It sets you up to push for game. From Under the Floorboards is a nice madness spell that lets you make a ton of zombies. We have a Gamble, because you don't really care about discarding certain cards, so Gamble is probably one of the better tutors for this deck. Faithless Looting, obviously you can see how good that is in the deck, along with Seize the Day. Seize the Day is the other big flashback spell other than Faithless Looting that I really like in here. Obviously you have that one big beater that you want to keep smacking with. You can keep seizing the day and beating down. Victimize, probably one of the best reanimation spells in the game, in my opinion. Being able to get 2 big threats back for 3 mana and sacking 1 small creature seems good. Another little 4 or 5 mana upgrade you can make that I think is fantastic for this deck is Living Death. You'll frequently find yourself in a situation where you have nothing on board and everything in graveyard. And you're like, okay, let's wipe all my opponent's boards and let me just reanimate the whole squad. Fantastic card. Love Living Death. It does so much for the deck. Called in the Netherworld is fantastic. Return target black creature card from your graveyard, but it madnesses for 0. Very important there. We also have Boneyard Parlay. A card I was never really a fan of when it first came out, but in this deck it's actually very nice. I do like it kind of being a almost like a fact or fiction type card where you're doing the piles and you're recurring value. Very good card. Beacon of Unrest can return target artifact or creature from your graveyard to the battlefield under your control, and then the beacon shuffles back in. And when you're churning through your deck as often as you do in this deck, you find that beacon multiple times. So I do like the shuffle back capabilities. Then we have a Torrent of Souls. It's not only creature recursion, but it can actually buff your entire team. because a lot of people don't realize creatures target player controls get +2/+0, not the creature you recur off the torrent. So it hits your whole board, which can, again, help you push for game if you're going wide with, like, zombie tokens. Then we have an Avacyn's Judgment, being able to madness this in and just shoot down an opponent with a big X fireball out of nowhere during their end phase when they're tapped out. Really, really powerful. That's going to wrap up the sorceries. Moving on to artifacts, we have a Rakdos Signet, Soul Ring, Ashnod's Altar, and Grimer of the Dead. Let's talk on the Grimer for a minute. It does come included with the deck, but I do think this needs a little discussion. Obviously, you can see what Ashnod's Altar is used for. Convert your creatures into mana, but the Grimer is really, really powerful. It's a 4-mana legendary artifact. You can pay 1, tap it, discard a card, and put a study counter on it. Then you can tap it, remove 3 study counters from it, and sacrifice it. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. They are black zombies in addition to their other colors and other types. It is one of those things that just can win you the game not out of nowhere. They see it coming. They have to handle it. And if they can't, they're in a bad spot. It's a very powerful card. Then getting into the last segment here, we have our enchantments. Animate Dead. Obviously, we're doing reanimator things, so we want to animate Dead. Warstorm Surge is fantastic. Being able to, every creature that enters, you get to send little damage bolts and ping down creatures, or just go face with them. Very important to how you win this game. Zombie Infestation is fantastic. Discard outlet that also keeps making more zombies for you. Eldest Reborn, a reanimator target that also causes your opponents to discard and sack stuff. Faith of the Devoted, more card draw. Or not card draw, more reach, because it's your opponents lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. Very, very important here. And then finally, we wrap it up with Curse of Fool's Wisdom. That is a nice little inclusion in the deck. I do like a Aura Curse that Madness is in, and then you're going to make them lose life, and you're going to gain life each time they draw cards. And of course, in Commander, everybody wants to be drawing cards. As for the mana base, it is 40 lands. I have it for the most part unaltered from the original. There is a couple little things, like I put in a Lava Claw Reaches, a Lantern-Lit Graveyard, just some budget mana base alternatives to add in. There's not really too much changes. The only thing I would, one of the things I would do is get your shock land and your check lands for these for Rakdos. Yeah, and then also I would, if you're gonna swap anything out, swap out the Exotic Orchard. It's not that Exotic Orchard is bad land. I just don't think it's very good in a 2-color deck, as opposed to a 3, 4, 5-color deck, where it's going to be more likely that you're going to see those colors off of at least one of your opponents. So, other than that, love this deck. It's such a funky deck. It plays in such weird ways. So if you want to pick up this, or you already own this Precon, I know they're also still widely available at big box stores. Your local game shop may differ. If they have it at your local game store, please buy it there. Support your local game store. If not, Target, Walmart, GameStop, places like that do have them. Still, I was just in Target the other day, and they still had this cycle of Commander decks for their normal MSRP of, like, I think it's 41 or 42 bucks at Target. But definitely easy line of upgrades on this deck, and I think it's a very solid, very fun deck. And not to mention, it has CEDH potential, so you can always take it that route if you want to be a spike. Thank you guys for watching. If you like the video, go ahead, please like, subscribe, comment down below. What do you think of the deck? You know, what changes would you make? Is there anything that maybe I didn't think of to add in? And if that's all, you know, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Peace.